Hi guys, welcome back. If you are new here, click the subscribe button. Also, if you are new here, hi, hello, my name is Kayla, and today I'm going to be doing my first daughter's birth story. No, you did not click on an old video. This is a new video, and I'm going to be telling my first daughter's birth story back in 2017. The first birth story that I did actually had my daughter in it, but since I don't show my kids anymore, I had to private that video. But this birth in particular is my favorite birth out of all three of my babies. It's the one that made me a mama, and I'm so proud of this birth story. So let's jump right into it. I actually had a prediction throughout my entire pregnancy that I would give birth on the day that the solar eclipse happened. The solar eclipse was August 21st, 2017. That day had come and gone, and I was actually kind of sad that she didn't make her debut on that day, but it was fine. She actually arrived 2 days later. So now onto the actual birth. It was August 22nd of 2017, and I actually started having contractions that night. They were kind of very irregular, not very timeable. I believe it was like just before midnight, so like just before the 23rd. And I started having pretty regular contractions around midnight. I started timing them around 12:45 a.m. on the 23rd, and I just started timing them, and my husband was sound asleep right next to me the entire time, which it's kind of funny. All of our babies that has happened, because all of our babies it's been in the middle of the night, except for my third baby. I was 37 weeks and 6 days at this point. So it was just before 38 weeks. This is also my first baby. Everyone had told me you are gonna go overdue. It is not uncommon to go overdue. And I was just like, I feel like I'm going to have this baby early. I just had that feeling. And I did. I wasn't due until September 7th. So I didn't even have a September baby. I had an August baby. So anyway, it's August 23rd at this point, and I started having contractions around 1 o'clock in the morning, 12:30, 1 o'clock. And I just started timing them. I believe they went from 18 minutes to 15 minutes to 11 minutes. And then they very quickly went to about 5 minutes apart, very, very regularly for like an hour. And I woke my husband up around like 3:15, and I was like, we gotta go. We already had our bags in the car, and it was time to go. Our hospital at the time was 10 minutes away, so it wasn't like a long drive. We got to the hospital at 3:20 a.m. and they checked me. They had got me into a room, they checked me, and they were like, well, this is your first baby. You know, they kind of do that whole, well, this is probably gonna take a while, this is your first baby. So they get me into the room and they check me. They check me at 3:40 a.m. and I am 3 centimeters dilated and 80% effaced. So this is definitely the real deal. We are going. And I knew in that moment that this was real labor. So they had watched me on the monitors for about 2 hours, and then they were gonna come back and just kind of like talk to me and stuff. So for the first like hour or so, they were like asking me questions, asking me about my pregnancy, asking me like all of these different things. And obviously just like checking me in and stuff, which is the normal thing that they do. 2 hours later at 5:40, they come in and I am 4 centimeters dilated. So I am thankfully dilating at this point. Because I wanted the epidural at that point, they were like, okay, do you want the epidural right now? Like, we can get the anesthesiologist going. Obviously it's gonna take some time for everything to get in there. They had to put a bag of fluids, they had to run fluids through me, and then they would get the anesthesiologist in there. Obviously the anesthesiologist can take a long time, and that's okay. And so I was like, you know, right now I want the anesthesiologist in here. So as fast as they can get here, get them here. So I labored for the next 2 hours. So in this birth, it took 2 hours for me to get the epidural from me requesting it. The anesthesiologist comes in and he was like, do you have like any back problems? Do you have anything that like would be an indicator that you can't have an epidural? And I was like, well, I have scoliosis. And so I told him that and he was like, okay. So he immediately checks my back. He does what you usually do and he like figures out where my spine is. And if you guys don't know the whole scoliosis, you have to bend over, they draw a line down your spine, you stand up and you see how curvature it is. And mine isn't so severe, but it is, you know, it's scoliosis. It sucks. So he was like, I think I will be able to do this. So he has me put a pillow on my chest like they would for an epidural. And my husband, I believe it was my husband, was holding my hands. I have to like curve my back. That's actually really, really hard for me to do with scoliosis. So I had to curve my back and hold still. Thankfully, this anesthesiologist was amazing and he was like, let me know when the next contraction comes, and when that contraction ends, we'll do it. So it's kind of like in between contractions, you have to do it really, really fast. And I love that he was able to do that because man, oh man, that made it so much better. I don't think I would have been able to sit as still as I did if I was in the middle of a contraction. I was actually really, really terrified for the epidural. And now that like I'm sitting here 5 years later, I'm like, why were you ever scared in the first place? And I think it's because people scared me about it. And they were like, oh, it's this big long needle. And it's like, I think I had this misconception, and I think a lot of people do, that the needle stays in your back. That's not how an epidural works. And so they put some numbing in your back and then they put a catheter through your back. The catheter is the thing that stays in your back. So I don't know why I was ever scared. I don't know. I just was. It was nothing compared to the IV. I've had so many freaking IVs at this point. And let me tell you, the IV hurts worse than the epidural. It really does. So at 7:45 in the morning, I got my epidural and I was feeling good, feeling great. After they got done with the epidural, my midwife comes in and she was like, do you want me to break your water? I was like, yeah, we can do that. Like, it's not really gonna affect me much. So we decided to break my water, and also at this point I was still dilated 4 centimeters. And so that's why we kind of decided to just break my water and see what happens. I was there to stay. It wasn't like it was going to be a huge deal with pain and such. So we decided, let's just break my water and see what happens. At 9:30, I decided to take a nap. Let me tell you, those epidural naps are golden. Golden. If you have an epidural, take a nap. Take a nap. Your body is still doing a lot of work, and even though you can't like physically feel how much work it's doing a lot of work. Take the nap. If you have an epidural, take a nap. I had actually taken 2 naps during my entire labor with her, and it was really, really nice. I was kind of like in and out as the doctors were coming in and nurses were coming in and such and just checking on me. But it was really, really nice. So from 9:30 to 10:15, I took a nap. The nurse had woken me up and she wanted to check me again and see if I was dilating anymore. So just to like see where my progress was going. And I was 6 centimeters dilated. So from the time I got the epidural to that point, I had already dilated over 2 centimeters. She also said that I was very, very thin. That was her quotes. So after that, I had fallen asleep again. And I woke up an hour later at 11:15 to feeling my contractions through the epidural. So the epidural was wearing off at this point. So I called the nurse in and I was like, hey, I'm feeling my contractions through my epidural. And she was like, okay, I'm gonna get the anesthesiologist to come back in here and see what they can do. So they gave me more medicine through my epidural space, and After that, I was good to go. At 12:25, I was 8 centimeters dilated, and at this point, when my nurse had checked me, she had blood on her glove, which meant that I had bloody show. Throughout this entire thing, I never really had my bloody show. Yeah, it was kind of weird. But yeah, at this point, I was 8 centimeters dilated. Around 12:30, I started shaking from the epidural and just from like labor in general. You can shake from the epidural or you can shake from labor because it's a lot of work that your body is doing to make this baby come out of you. But I also started to have a headache. And at this point, the nurse comes in and she was like, do you want some like Tylenol? I could give you some Motrin. And I was like, I believe at this point I had actually decided to take the meds that they were giving me for the headache, because it was like very, very, very uncontrollable headache. It was like pounding and it was very, very painful. But after I took the meds and kind of like calmed down a little bit, I believe at this point I also started to take a nap. So this was at 1:50. I actually started feeling pressure. I called my nurse in and I was like, I feel some pressure. I'm not sure if something is going on. Not sure if I'm fully dilated, all of that kind of stuff. She decides to not check me and she says, you know, we're just gonna wait a little bit, which I definitely think at this point I was fully dilated and the baby was just coming down. So I was feeling tons and tons and tons of pressure, which is what you feel when you're fully dilated and the baby is just descending. So this was at 1:50. I believe at this point, I also started to kind of like come in and out of a nap as well. I was very, very, very tired. I hadn't really slept much, so you can imagine. So at 3:20, I want to say, my midwife comes in and she goes, okay, let's check you again. She puts her fingers in probably about that far. She can't even get to my cervix because the baby's head is right there. She goes, okay, we're not doing any practice pushes. The baby's head is right here. We are going to push. So she gets all gowned up and stuff, and the nurses come in and it is time to push. I had also heard before going into labor and everything that first time moms take forever to dilate and then take forever to push. I've heard that it's on average about 2 hours that a woman will push. That was not me. It was my surprise when I pushed for 15 minutes because the epidural worked so well, especially since I had gotten the second dose through my epidural. I could not move my legs. I could not feel my legs. My legs felt super freaking heavy. And my nurse and my husband, boyfriend at the time, which is so weird to say, had to hold my legs back so I could push. And I actually wish I knew about laboring techniques and pushing techniques at this point. I was a first-time mom. I had no clue that you could do anything other than push on your back. But in my case, it didn't really interfere with my pushing, but I just kind of wish that I had some different ways that I could have pushed. You know, they used the bar or they used the little rope or, you know, things like that. So I definitely wish I knew more about the whole birthing process before going into it. At 3:23, she checks me and her head is right there, and she was born at 3:35 p.m. There was no practice pushes. I pushed her out in 3 contractions. I did not tear. I was very, very scared that I was gonna tear. I tore internally and I only needed, I think I had 5 or 4 stitches for that internal tear. So yeah, that was kind of the whole birthing process. She was out in 10 minutes. They laid her straight on my chest. I'm going to put some pictures up, but obviously cover her face. They laid her straight on my chest and we got to cuddle and bond and do skin to skin. And that is expect to cry. That is the most amazing feeling, having your first baby placed on your chest for the first time, and I'm just like, I wish I could experience that again. They had to take her away after about 5 to 10 minutes. I can't remember at this point, but they took her away after 5 to 10 minutes because she wasn't crying. She was having trouble getting things out of her lungs. And so they took her over, and I actually have a picture of this. I had no idea that this happened until afterwards, when my husband sent me the pictures. Boyfriend at the time sent me the pictures. They had actually shoved a tube down her throat to try and get suction for stuff out of her lungs. I had no clue that this was happening. It was just kind of like all a daze. I was in like this la la world. I was in a big foggy blur. Let's be real. They also, at this point, took her to do measurements. She was 19.5 inches long and 6 pounds even. So almost 38 weeks, she was 6 pounds. I make very, very tiny babies. I was 5 pounds, 11 ounces when I was born. So my kids are bigger than I was. So after they got her all bundled up and everything, they laid her on my chest again, and we just sat there for the next hour. I actually had visitors. Do I want to talk about this? Let's talk about it because it needs to be talked about. I had visitors that I had told not to come until we were in the maternity ward. I didn't want visitors until I had bathed. I was bonded with my baby. I had breastfed. Like at this point, I hadn't even breastfed. And I had some visitors come for about 2 hours. I still had blood on my hands because while I was pushing, the midwife was like, put your hand down here, touch the head, and I did that. It was so cool. I actually think that was the only baby that I did that with, which kind of sad. I wish I did that with all of my babies. So I had uninvited guests come and meet the baby. I, at this point, was a new mom. I was trying to figure out motherhood, and it's kind of hard when you have visitors who come and they don't let you know. Let me just say, if there is someone in your family that's having a baby, leave them be. Leave them be. I think that's why I really, really, really liked the COVID restrictions, is because there were no visitors at the hospital at all. And I know a lot of moms love that. I loved that. And it was really, really, really nice to have that. And let's just keep that little restriction right there, even though there's not a restriction anymore. You know, that kind of thing. If your family or friend is having a baby, make a plan with them to come. Don't show up unannounced. Just don't. Just don't. Promise you, it will save you in the long run. But I wanted to wait until we were in the maternity ward to, like in our postpartum suite, in order to have visitors, and that did not happen. So I had actually told the nurse at one point. They were like, oh, you have visitors here, and I was like, tell them to go away. Like, I had just given birth. I had blood on my hands. I hadn't even breastfed at this point. I just wanted to bond with my baby, and obviously when visitors come, they kind of take your baby too, and so that was not fun. But anyway, besides all of that, the entire birth was amazing, and it's truly one of my favorite births. It really is my favorite birth. That birth was picture perfect. And now she's 5 years old. And I can't believe I've been a mom for almost 6 years. I found out on January 5th of 2017 that I was expecting. And so it's almost been 6 years since that day. And it's so crazy. Anyway, that is the entire video I have for you guys. I will have an entire video of Elliot's birth as well, my second baby's birth, coming up here soon. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will talk to you in my next one. Bye guys.